When James Harris bought the local police station, no one expected him to dismantle the system that had oppressed his community for years. Faced with corruption and racism, James was determined to rewrite the rules. What happened next will shock even those who've seen it all. But let's start from the beginning. James Harris walked into the local police station with a calm, purposeful stride. At 30 years old, he was no stranger to this place. He had spent his whole life in this neighborhood, watching as the local police force systematically targeted black residents. He had seen the brutality, the corruption, and the indifference firsthand. But now, James wasn't just a bystander. He was the new owner of the station. With his power and resources, he was determined to make a change. As James moved through the station, a group of officers were huddled around a desk, discussing a recent bust. They didn't pay him any mind as he walked by. To them, he was just another face, another temporary figure who would come and go. They had no idea that the game had changed. Later that day, Detective Mark Thompson called James into his office. He leaned back in his chair with an air of self-assurance, clearly expecting things to go his way. Jacobs, another officer, stood quietly by the window, arms crossed. "Look, man," Thompson began, his tone casual but condescending. "I know you're probably new to this whole thing, but we can make things easier for you. We've got connections. We can help keep things running smooth. In exchange, we just need a little incentive." James didn't flinch. He knew exactly what Thompson meant. "And what exactly would that incentive be?" James asked, his voice steady. Thompson slid an envelope across the desk, the contents clearly heavy with cash. "Just a little donation, to keep things under control. We don't want things to get complicated." James didn't touch the envelope. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Thompson's. "I don't play that game," he said calmly, "and I'm the one in charge now." Thompson's expression faltered. He had expected James to be another easy mark, someone to intimidate or manipulate. But James wasn't backing down. "You think you can buy me off?" James continued. "You're wrong. I'm not here to make deals like that. You're going to start following the law, or I'll make sure you don't have a job here, or anywhere else." For a moment, Thompson and Jacobs exchanged a look. They realized, far too late, that they had misjudged James. The power dynamic had shifted, and they were no longer the ones in control. James stood up, his resolve unshaken. "Consider this your warning," he said. "Things are changing, and you're going to have to adapt." As James walked out of the office, the weight of his words hung in the air. The station that had long been a tool of injustice now had a new owner, and he wasn't about to let the old ways continue. The next day, James summoned Detective Mark Thompson and Officer Ryan Jacobs to a meeting in the conference room. Both men walked in with the same cocky, relaxed demeanor they had the day before. They were used to controlling the narrative, used to people caving in to their pressure and manipulation. They assumed James, the new guy, would be no different. But they were about to be proven wrong. James was already seated at the long conference table, his posture upright, his gaze unwavering. He didn't stand up when they entered, and he didn't greet them with pleasantries. He simply waited, his presence commanding attention. As soon as they were settled, he spoke, his voice firm but calm, with an undercurrent of authority that immediately shifted the room's energy. "I think we should revisit that conversation from yesterday," James said, his tone even. "Except now, it's my turn to make an offer." Jacobs raised an eyebrow, glancing at Thompson for reassurance. "What are you talking about?" he asked, trying to mask his confusion with a smirk. James didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I'm the new owner of this station," he said, leaning forward slightly. So you're either going to start respecting me, or you'll find yourselves out of a job. Maybe even worse. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Thompson and Jacobs exchanged a stunned glance, both of them caught off guard by James's revelation. This couldn't be true. The black man who had walked in here just a day ago, the one they'd underestimated, he was in charge now? They didn't know how to process it, but James didn't give them the chance to question him for long. He continued, his voice cool but carrying weight, each word cutting through their disbelief. I know you've been running scams, shaking down local businesses and taking bribes, James said, his eyes never leaving theirs. But those days are over. If you want to keep your badges, you'll start following the law, or I'll make sure you never wear them again. Thompson's initial shock quickly gave way to defiance, his features twisting into a sneer. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, as though to dismiss James as a naive threat. You think you're going to change things around here? Thompson scoffed. This station's been like this for years, kid. You can't just waltz in and... James cut him off, his voice rising with authority. Don't call me kid, he said sharply. You're about to find out that I can do more than waltz. I can break you. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. The smugness that had initially filled Thompson and Jacobs evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that they were in uncharted territory. They had always believed they could manipulate the system to their advantage. But now they were faced with a force far stronger than they could have imagined. A man with the power and the will to tear down everything they had built. The tension was palpable. Jacobs, still silent, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his bravado fading as the magnitude of the situation hit him. Thompson, who had prided himself on his unshakable confidence, now seemed small, caught in the web of his own arrogance. They both knew they were in a fight they didn't know how to win. James leaned back in his chair, his gaze never wavering. He knew the game had changed. He had just won the first round, and the power was his now. The weeks that followed were filled with a growing sense of paranoia among the officers who had once felt untouchable. Thompson and Jacobs, feeling the pressure, started to push back in subtle ways. They would drag their feet on reports, slow down the processing of evidence, and leak false information to the press, hoping to damage James's reputation. But James was no rookie when it came to dealing with crooked systems. He made sure the media was on his side, using social media to expose the officers' corruption. Video footage started popping up online, showing Thompson and Jacobs accepting bribes from local business owners, and soon, the entire town was buzzing about the corruption that had festered under the surface for years. The police department, once a pillar of the community, was now a laughingstock. But James wasn't laughing. He was just getting started. The breaking point came one evening when Thompson, desperate, tried to approach James in private, pleading with him to reconsider. You don't know what you're doing, he said, his voice desperate. If you go public with this, the department will fall apart. You'll ruin everything. James looked at him with cold determination. You ruined everything the moment you decided to steal from this community. The tension reached its peak during a town hall meeting where James was scheduled to speak about the future of the police department. The room was packed, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. As James stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. I've been watching this department for years, James began, his voice strong and unwavering. And I'm here to tell you that the days of corruption and fear are over. No one, not the mayor, not the police chief, not anyone, is above the law. The crowd erupted into applause, but Thompson and Jacobs sat in the back, their faces tight with anger. They knew their time was running out. James turned his attention to the two officers. I've already filed the necessary paperwork. he announced. Detective Mark Thompson and Officer Ryan Jacobs have been relieved of duty, effective immediately. They will be investigated for bribery, extortion, and abuse of power. Thompson jumped to his feet, his face flushed with rage. You can't do this. You have no power here. James smiled. I have all the power I need. And trust me, you'll regret ever underestimating me. As Thompson and Jacobs were escorted out of the meeting, the entire room stood in support of James. His moral victory wasn't just about kicking out corrupt cops. It was about sending a message that no matter how entrenched the system is, it can be changed. And for the first time in a long while, James felt the weight of the world on his shoulders lighten.